All right, well, let's get started. Tell me a little bit about you, your company, how you transition from HR into a consultant and what that looks like for you today.
Certainly. So I've been in HR now for close to 25 years, which sometimes scares me when I think about it. How time has flown. I worked, in for-profit, nonprofit, construction, healthcare. I worked the full gamut of roles. And this is something that I dreamed of doing. My whole goal has always been to advocate for people. Helping people in their professional spaces is just what I thrive on doing. So I was I went back to school later in life to earn my bachelor's and then subsequently my master's degree. And as my master's program was coming to an end, I just started feeling like there's more, right? So we were in the pandemic, we were a year into the pandemic, and I was just watching organizations, through social media, like reading posts and hearing things about how much people were struggling to hire, struggling to maintain, struggling to reinvent the wheel, if you will, right? Because they needed to do things differently. So people who had been fully in person, now they're having to go remote or hybrid in some cases. My fellow HR colleagues around the world was just like, what do we do? Where's the help? And I was like, I helped the organization basically in less than a week of about 100 employees go fully remote. We had no issues, right? I helped to lead the charge, right, with the IT team and some other executive leaders. And I was like, I'm ready to take my skill set and scale it because people need help. How can I do this? And I started to feel a miss. Right. And I was in a meeting with my manager one day. We were having a conversation and I don't even know where the conversation was going at this point. But I got to a point when I was like, you know what? Today is the day. Today is the day. And at some point at the end of the conversation, I was like, look, I'm going to submit my resignation. So I've never been afraid to quit. I've never been afraid to resign from a job. Right. And so I was like, she's like, I felt it coming. I knew it was coming. And they subsequently became my first client.
Oh, wow.
And so it was just one of those things. And the way that it happened, I knew it was meant to be. So a lot of our business to this point has been by referral, just because people know what we do and they like what we bring. And so here I am today. Here I am today.
That's great. Yeah. Well, what a time to make such a big change. And it sounds like you were just called to a greater purpose. Obviously, you had been working in the same, seat or role that a lot of your clients are sitting in now. And so you could see all of the real pains and struggles that everyone was dealing with at just a crazy time for change in the workplace. Like you said, everybody having to go pretty much remote overnight, the market getting really bad, then getting really good. Then it was crazy competitive to hire anybody because it seemed like everybody was hiring everybody. People were switching jobs like crazy. And it was like, if you couldn't hire somebody in a matter of days, you were SOL, right? You had to start that hiring process over again. And so, yeah, it was just a crazy time. So I love that you took the opportunity, you were called by a greater purpose, and you took that leap. Like you said, you weren't afraid of taking that next step. And to me, that, shows me the confidence, obviously, that you have in yourself, but also the passion that you have in what you're doing for your clients. So love to hear that. Let's talk a little bit about your clients. What types of organizations do you typically work with?
Yeah, so we mostly service or partner with nonprofits and associations. The mission doesn't matter. I enjoy being around driven people, a group of people that are working toward the same thing. It's something about that synergy that just keeps me going, right? That passion, because I'm really passionate about what I do, that it's like we're all working together for the greater good of this thing. Because there is no boundary, if you will. It's like, let's just do it. Let's go, right? And when one person's feeling down, someone else jumps in and they got an idea and then it reinvigorates everyone. And so that's what keeps me going. So we're mostly nonprofits and associations. It doesn't matter whether they're healthcare or trade associate. None of that matters, right? We choose the funnest thing, I guess I'll say, about being in business for myself has been I get to pick and choose which organizations I want to be with. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. If I meet with a CEO or a head of HR and they're trying to, we're trying to determine if this will be a good partnership. If they are not about their people, if the way that they see people isn't an embracing spirit of all people, regardless of where they're from, those are not our people. We don't partner. We've turned business away based on that simple fact. If you're a leader and you're not about the whole team, not just the executive team, not just the tenured team, but the whole team, regardless of their background, again, we walk away from that business.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think it's a good lesson as well for, people that are on the market and perhaps looking for a new HR or talent acquisition job. When they're evaluating their next opportunity, they can take a similar process to what you do in evaluating which clients you work with, because whether you're a consultant and you're working with clients to help them overhaul their HR talent acquisition strategy, or somebody that's looking to make a move in their career to do the same thing for the company they work for, it's important that you evaluate the leadership team and the values of the business. And is that aligned with what you're looking for? Because if it's not, and you join that company, are you really going to be able to make the change and impact that you're hoping to make and feel meaning in the work that you do each and every day?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If it's not that, then what is it? Right? Like people at every level within an organization, their goal is to you're hiring them to help the organization achieve their goals. However, I'm as an employee, I want to be somewhere where I feel valued. I want to know that my efforts, regardless of my role, is working toward the greater good, and that they are appreciated, and that I belong, and that I am appreciated too, right? It doesn't mean that every conversation is a good conversation. It doesn't mean that I don't have some spaces to grow as an employee, but it's not a punitive environment. It's not an environment where, as though, again, only people from Harvard, do well, right? There's nothing wrong with them, but hey, I'm from community college. Can I, my contributions count too? I got something to say. So value me as a person regardless.
Yep. Yeah. And what advice would you give people that maybe are evaluating a new opportunity and trying to figure out if that company is right for them based on the leadership team and the values? Like when you're evaluating partnering with a client, what are some of those signs you look for, maybe questions you ask or things you dig into to make sure that it is the right fit for you? Because I think our audience or people that are on the market could take something away from that.
Certainly. So the first thing I say is make it a conversation. So yeah, they're interviewing you for fit, but you are also interviewing them for fit, right? So it's not enough to just be like, oh, these are our core values, right? So talk to me about how those core values show up in your organization, right? That's what I want to know. So I'm asking questions around those core values. Sometimes I personally may ask it, just like I said, talk to me about how those show up. Talk to me about your CEO. If I'm not talking to the CEO, I'm talk to me about your CEO. What is his philosophy around the people, right? How often are we having all staff meetings? Is your CEO like in his office, or does he walk around if, you're in person? What types of employee engagement activities do you do? Talk to me about what's happened in the last year. What have you done to show support? If they're a remote organization, when was the last time the organization got together in person? So I'm digging into the culture, right? What are some of the things that are, that we celebrate as an organization? What are some of the things we do for fun? And so you're asking questions, and it'll all depend on the, obviously, how the conversation is going, but you should have a tool bag full of questions that you want to dig into the culture. Once you're talking to the manager, how do we're asking questions about how they like to engage with their employees. I would ask, so say I made a mistake on a big project, right? And I didn't catch it and you caught it. Talk to me about how you would respond to me and what process you would take to help me to right side so that I don't do it again. And then we're watching how they respond. Right. And then, so another thing that I like to tell people is, especially if you're going through panel interviews, have a question or two that you're asking everyone. about the culture, right? Because now you're seeing if you're seeing trending, you're getting trending themes. And so how do we take that information? Because now we got to put it together at the end, but it's really important to dig into those non-tangible things, because they'll tell you, oh, we got this award. That's all great because we're doing good work. But how am I feeling as an employee getting to that work? Is it a nonstop grind? Are you calling me when I'm on vacation? So you got to figure out a way to get to some of those things. And shoot, I've even asked a potential manager, when was the last time you took a vacation? And we laughed about it, but I wanted to know. Because if you're working 24/7, then you expect me to work 24/7.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's really good advice, because whether it's a talent acquisition leader looking for a new role or anybody looking for any type of role, I think you see a lot of content out there about interviewing is a two-way street, and make sure you ask the company questions too. But nobody really offers much by way of, okay, so how do you do that? What questions do you ask? How do you go about asking those questions? Just like we see all this advice around how to interview candidates, and make sure you're incorporating, behavioral interview questions, and make sure you're using structured interviews and you're asking people the same questions interview to interview. Those are some of the things that you just mentioned. But not a lot of people factor that into their preparation for an interview and what they're going to go in and ask the employer. And so I like that you touch on some behavioral questions, open-ended questions, just not your typical, do you do this or do you do that? Yes, no type of stuff. And that, I think, helps people, really gather some great intel on the organization that they're considering. So that's awesome. Appreciate that advice. So going back to your clients, I guess just generally, maybe high level overview, what types of services are you typically offering? Is it, everything HR under the sun? Is it highly focused on talent acquisition? Where do you seem to be spending most of your time?
Yep. So we call ourselves the acquisition to exit talent partners, right? So we can take a person from, first touch point to their exit. And obviously when we first started the business, we wanted to do it all because we wanted to say, hey, we're here, come see us. But where we have spent most of our time since starting is in employee relations. So as you can imagine, with a lot of professionals coming in, or even tenured professionals now being their first time working fully remote, or even in a hybrid situation, a lot of employee relations issues are coming up that people are dealing with. Recruitment, so talent acquisition, the whole kit and caboodle. So again, from start to onboarding, and then helping organizations enhance their processes. So, so how do we onboard? What should an onboarding program look like? And then helping them to realize that new hire orientation and onboarding are two separate things. Right? And so really helping them to make their processes efficient for this hybrid or this fully remote workspace. And even those that are in person, right? So some people haven't changed their process in a long time because the work gets in the way. Not, it's the work, it's the maintenance of doing. It's like we're constantly chasing that BHAG, that big, hairy, audacious goal, right? We're constantly doing that. We're constantly trying to keep the people that we have, engaged, and making sure that all of those things are running. And so we haven't touched this onboarding a new hire recruitment process in, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And so we got to modernize that so that then we are able to attract and retain the new people. And so again, those three buckets would be where we are spending most of our time.
Yep. And you mentioned that, you're working with clients that have transitioned from being in person to remote or hybrid. What are some of the biggest challenges that you see for those types of organizations when they go to that type of environment, specifically as it relates to hiring? Like, what are they struggling with and how are you helping them?
Yeah, so the biggest struggle has been trying to keep the process that was in person the same, like with very minimal tweaks, the same as it was in person now that it's remote. So whether it be too many touch points, not giving the right information, not being automated enough, or using the tools that's at your disposal. Those would be the biggest three. And then forgetting things, right? And it's not intentional. Because it's not intentional, it's because we don't have a written process. Now, because we've been doing this in this role for, several years, so we know what it should be. And so we don't have something that we are following and then to transition over into this remote space. So employees, for example, they aren't getting the benefit summary up front. They don't know what the benefits. I've seen people go through the whole process, and then after they've been offered the role and accepted the role, and then the candidate is understanding what those benefits are, and now they're not happy with them.
Yep, and the team needs to have all that information readily available for candidates. I've seen in the past where, to your point, we'll use the benefits example, candidates late in the process, and you're close to, giving them an offer. Maybe you are giving them an offer, but they're considering several other things as well. And we know the importance of, time to hire because they're considering other companies too. And if a candidate asks you a question or they ask for information and you aren't, not that you have to be able to present it on the phone, but it's like if you can't send it to them quickly right after you get off the call, provide that to them. If it's, hey, I got to go, yeah, let me request that for you. Let me get that. Somebody here's got it. And it takes you a couple days to get back to them. It's like you might have already now lost that candidate. And not only that, even if you haven't lost them yet, you're probably not giving them the best impression about how you're running your day-to-day operations. If it's like, let me go talk to this person, let me talk to that person, and let me get back to you. So a lot of it, like you said, comes down to documenting things up front, and really just bringing a lot of structure to the process, but also thinking about upfront, what are all the things that our candidates are going to need throughout the process? And let's make sure before we even start that process that we have those things. So A, we're either proactive about putting those in front of the candidate. So we give it to them before they even ask the question because we know our candidates so well and we know what's going to be important to them. Or B, we're ready to deliver anytime the candidate asks for things. And so I think it's really about that structure, really leaning into this, this candidate-led type of hiring process where you just got to put yourself in the mind of the candidate. What do they need? What questions are they going to ask? What resources are they going to need access to? What information isn't readily available? Let me think of all those things so I can be, Johnny on the spot, like I said, either when they ask for it, or even better, I'm showing I know my candidates so well that I'm giving them this information before they even ask for it. And to me, that's like the ultimate place where you want to be, is that level of proactiveness, which really, I think, speaks volumes about the organization, especially in such a competitive market, and especially for smaller organizations.
Absolutely. Because so here's the thing. You, as that talent acquisition manager, the HR partner, or in that talent acquisition role, you are the introduction to the organization, right? So you are the introduction to candidates, what will be their employment experience. We really have to start thinking about our employees as a customer, the candidates as a customer. Years ago, I had this mindset. I used to tell myself, like, they are our customers. They are our customers. Not even realizing that it was this thing that's now becoming more and more relevant. The customer experience, right? And so I had a manager who used to always say, we want to answer the questions before they're asked. Give them all of the information up front. Give them, so the questions that they don't know that they should be asking, let's give them that up front, right? The whole picture, not to overwhelm them, but to arm them with the knowledge necessary so that then they can make the decisions that they need to make. Yep. And so, yes, we should be thinking about providing an excellent candidate experience that fits our budget, that fits our organization, but that show the candidates that we value your time. We care about you as a person. And so we're going to create the best experience we can at this moment so that then you can walk away as a fan, even if you didn't get the job.
Yep. Yeah, and I love the analogy you use with the customer experience and how we think about, as businesses, as organizations, how do we think about our customers, or maybe in the in the sense of an association, it's how they think about their members, right? And that's no different than the approach that you should apply to your candidates. People talk all the time, know your customers, interview your customers. Your customers will give you the answers to the test, right? If you just talk to them, they'll tell you everything they need. It's no different from your candidates. And so I think, A, you need to be proactive about that. But B, if you know that the importance of learning more about your candidates and what's important to them, What do they care about? What information do they need? What questions are they going to have? You're mindful of that as you go through the hiring process. And so for the next time as well, or as you recap one hiring process you ran, you could think about all those things of, here are new things I learned about our candidate base. Here's what's coming up. Here's what's important to them. These are new questions we've never gotten before. Let's make sure the next time that we go and hire, we have information or we have the answers to these questions, and we're putting that proactively in front of them. And that's how you create this, tight feedback loop with everybody on the hiring team to ultimately improve the hiring process and the candidate experience. Now, you mentioned something about building a candidate experience that, is aligned with who we are and also our budget. And budget was the key word that stood out to me because I think that's top of mind for so many organizations, whether they're a nonprofit or they're a private company. It doesn't matter. Everybody's talking about doing more with less, becoming more efficient. So as you're consulting with your clients, where do you start with that, right? Like if an organization comes to you and they say, hey, we need to be doing more with less, is that less people? Is that less tools? Is it all of the above? Less money to spend on advertising? It's probably a combination of all those things. So where do you start in helping them break all that down? Because it can be overwhelming, especially if you're a one-person HR team and your CEO is telling you, we got to be more efficient. You're like, okay, cool. Where do we start with that, right? So how would you break that down with a client?
Certainly. So first, I want to see what you're currently doing for say a product. Like, let's show me the documentation, and then I'm going to shadow you through something, right? Especially if something is on the horizon and it's coming up. Not if they just don't have anything right now. I want to see it. I want to feel it. I just want to sit back. I'm a fly on the wall. I want to feel what that thing looks like because I put myself in the candidate's shoes, and then obviously I've been that one person show. So I know, so then I'm just feeling what they're doing and then they're going through. So once we get there, so my thought is, first of all, process is king and queen. It's a one that stop, like once we see that we're going to start to look at your process, I want to know what is your training program? So how are new managers in the organization trained? We're literally going step by step. So we want to see, I'll take a step back for a second. We want to see what are your touch points with the candidate? How are you training managers? What does that interview process look like for the people? So are they meeting with 10 people? Are they meeting with only the key stakeholders that will integrate with that job or interact with that job? And we start to take it apart, which is sometimes the hardest piece because sometimes I'm taking the process apart with the person who created it. And so we start to take it apart. So we all right, let's get the process. We're going to remove waste from the process. What is waste, Lakia? Waste is those unnecessary touch points. So again, so why do we need 5 phone screens with 5 different people? And let's even go back. Do we have the right position description? So before we do anything, let's make sure that this is the role that we're hiring for. Let's make sure that we are aligned because we always want the $200,000 candidate with the $50,000 budget. Why do we need somebody to do all 100 of these things? That's going to be great 2 years down the road, but the person is highly qualified and that can take the program from step 10 to step 50 is not the same person that we want to hire when we're only at the design phases of said implementation for the organization. That person is already there and has been there and done that. They're not going to want to roll their sleeves up and do this. They want to lead a team. They want to think about strategy. So we got to get that position right? Once we get that right, we want to make sure that when we're interviewing, that the managers know what they can or that they should and should not ask. That anybody that's on that panel know what to ask and what not to ask, right? We want to make sure and that everyone is getting the same experience. It doesn't matter, right? So now you may take a staff level role and then an executive role. And that executive role, obviously they're going to meet with more people and they're going to meet. But at a baseline level, everyone is receiving the same experience, even if it's for the role type, position, or level within an organization, right? So the touch points are the same. The overall interview process kind of looks the same, but it may be more interviews than not. And so we really rebuild the whole thing. We rebuild the process from scratch to remove the waste, to ensure that there is a process, that process is documented, it's being followed. We don't want a process to stifle us. We want to keep some creativity there, but it has to be thoughtful, it has to be meaningful, and most certainly it has to be compliant, right? And so we just tear away and then rebuild. So I'm gonna pause for a second. Am I answering your question?
Okay. That was really great insight. And at the end of the day, it comes down to finding friction in the process. And like you said, it starts with you shadowing the organization. It's like, all right, we got a boat. Let's fill it up with water and see where the holes are, right? See where this ship starts sinking. And so, I think you bring up a good point too, with it starts all the way in the front end of this process. Using the job description or the job ad that's ended up getting created as an example. If you're mismanaging expectations from that standpoint, and you're getting people applying for the job, but they're not going to be the people that you end up hiring, but you're still taking those folks through the process, that's a lot of wasted time and energy. And it also makes you think that you need more applicants and you need to spend more money and do more things to get the job out there, because you're not getting the candidates that you want, and your conversion ratios from stage to stage are horrible. But at the end of the day, it might just be in the very front end of the process that you're not managing the expectations for the people that are coming to apply, and so you're attracting too broad of a crowd, and that then doesn't allow you to be efficient downstream. So like you said, it's just evaluate the process, find the friction, find the holes, plug those things up. And then once you've got everybody running, more or less the same process across these different roles, that's then what allows you to make changes and see what's working and not working. But if you don't have a consistent process and you've got, a leaky boat, you're never going to know which changes you're making are actually moving the needle one way or the other. And so I like that you start with process first. And I think that's good advice for any organization that's looking to become, more efficient. A lot of organizations will immediately look at people on the team or tools they're using or money they're spending ads on and things like that. But at the end of the day, there's probably most of the inefficiencies lay within the process itself.
Absolutely. And you know what I would add to that? And the way we're using the tools. So a lot of times organizations, we've talked about organizations, doing more with less. But, when you think about organizations with money, they throw money at the problems and they throw people at the problems. But truly, it's not always money and it's not always people. It's the process.
Yep.
You can throw as many people at it as you want. If the process is awful, they're just going to convolute it even more. It's going to be even more sticky. And so for me, one of my favorite sayings is making $1 out of 15 cents, right? And that means doing the best that you can with the tools and what you have. So some people see a dead end. I see a highway with endless possibilities. So I don't see roadblocks. I'm like, we're going to get through this. And that's one of the most valuable things that I bring to my clients is finding that way out of no way. Making $1 out of 15 cents. Some people, when they see that quote or they see that thing that I write, they think it's about money. Couldn't be further from the truth, right? It's really about being creative. It's truly about having perseverance. It's like, how do we get out of this? Okay, there is a way. And recognizing that you can't be the only voice at the table.
Yep.
So you got to partner with some people. You got to throw this idea out at people inside and outside of your organization to understand some better ways, and then to utilize, again, the tools that you have. Because if you don't have the budget, the money is not there, that's fine. Okay, let's see how we can make this work. I'll tell you one time, I took a very manual, paper-heavy recruitment process at an organization of about 95, close to 100 people. And I turned that thing into a well-oiled machine. I could have sat back and be like, I need money for an ATS. We had what we had, and this is all we could do. And so then how do we make this work? Oh, and by the way, I was a department of one. But it made life much easier because we were also experiencing the highest levels of recruitment that this organization had ever had. And so turning it into a process, following that process, and creating an experience for the candidates and then the managers helped things, and setting expectations internally. helped it to run much smoother. So this is how we make, I tell people out here, take this from, if you don't take anything else from me, learn how to make $1 out of 15 cents. Learn how to use the tools that you have and don't see any roadblocks, and figure out, even if it's just for the meantime, just in the meantime, how to make this thing work, because it reduces that internal stress on you. And then it's also like a strengthening. Like, I get excited behind it and I feel powerful, almost like this is something that could have stopped me. And now here we are 6 months, 12 months later with this working like a well-oiled machine. If you start to utilize that mindset, that thought, it develops, and then you start seeing more things as opportunity as opposed to challenge.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I love the saying, and to your point, it's not about money. It's about being creative. And ultimately, it's about control the controllables. You've got what you've got in front of you. So you've got to figure out a way to work with it. That doesn't mean you can't add on new things later on, or try new things, or buy new things. But the reality is, what most organizations do is, to your point, they throw, whether it's money or some other big grand idea at a problem, but at the end of the day, you've got to dig in and really fix that problem and control what you can control about it. Otherwise, you're just going to compound the issue when you add more things to the mix. And like we said earlier, if you don't have a really well-defined process and you've smoothed it out and you've removed bottlenecks and friction, you're never going to know what's working or what's not working. So even if you do the new thing, it's like you're just going to compound the issues that you already have. So it's almost like, when in doubt, just control the controllables, and, it will completely change the way you perceive what's in front of you, like you said, from a dead end to an open highway. And it gives you a lot of room to run. And then when we've done all that, now, as you've mentioned earlier in this call, you've set a really strong baseline. And it's a place now from which you can grow from. Versus if you just try and throw things at the issue without addressing the actual root of the issue, you're just building on top of a shaky foundation. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm using a lot of analogies here, but I think it works. I think
it does. And you're speaking my language. I can't tell you how many times I said it. At a baseline level, we gotta, ensure that the foundation is solid. We gotta shore up the foundation, because if it's an organization that's been around for a really long time, the foundation is the foundation. So now we gotta go back and we got to shore it up. If anyone, you own a house and you had an old house like mine and you had some foundation issues, you know what that means, right? And so, we got to get it right so that then we can have another 50 or 60 years on top of this. But the next 50 or 60, they're modern. They are attracting the people, and they're helping us to get to these goals that we have ahead. Not to say that what we did in the past was wrong. It was great for that time. But what we did back then is not going to get us, where we're trying to go.
Yep. And that's the challenge. And it's a challenge for a lot of, small teams and small organizations, as you mentioned it earlier, is everyone wants to do the work, do the next thing, put one foot in front of the other. We got so many things on our plate, and nobody wants to take a step back and say, what are we actually doing here, right? Let's break it down. And if we can really stabilize the foundation, it gives us a much better platform to go from. Now, before, we hopped on the podcast, you mentioned to me that prior to starting your consulting work, you were at an organization that was about 100 or so people. And I think you said you were either running HR and talent acquisition solo, maybe there was another person, but regardless, very tiny function, but you were supporting a lot of people, a lot of open roles. So maybe you could speak a little bit about that experience, because I know in our audience, there's a lot of folks that are in a similar position. So from your perspective, like being a really, really lean team, like what are the challenges that come with that? But also, what are the opportunities? Where do you start to really break out of this feeling of maybe feeling overwhelmed to really feeling, like you said, like an HR superhero, right? Where you've got everything, humming like a well-oiled machine.
Ooh, you just took me back. I got to take a second to get into this, because that was a time. So I think the first thing is just understanding that this is a thing, this is my thing, and I got to get through it, right? Like, it was a time. It was a time to be had. I was solely running the day-to-day operations of this 100-person organization, all functions of HR. So, and nothing stopped, right? It was always going. So it was the recruitment, it was the employee relations, it was the new hire onboarding. I was in every interview. I was part of every interview panel. Everyone. Oh, I had payroll. You know, let's go on. We can go on and on and on. Oh, and then we were implementing a new HRIS system. And who was the lead for that? Me too, right? I had a person working for me at the time, and she was more committed. She was committed to me. So HR wasn't her thing. She wasn't really interested in it, but she was so dedicated to me. And so she was there to help, but there was some limitations in which she could touch, what she could do, not just from a training and development standpoint, right? And so, but I was it. So I was it. And the challenges, it was being everything to everyone at all times.
Yep.
It was the people, who I was supporting, not extending grace. My thing is important and is important. So where is this? Where is this? So it was like, okay, hold up. You just sent this over, just here's the SLA, the service level agreement. Give me 48 hours to get back to you. 48 hours was too long. Why can't you get back to me in the same day, right? Is this idea of, again, having clear, defined expectations. I was trying to implement some of those SLAs, right? Like, because I needed to do things to slow me down. So the challenges was always ensuring the integrity in the work, because you're touching too many things. Everything is urgent at all levels within the organization. So ensuring the integrity, making sure that we aren't cutting corners, because compliance is real, whether it's at the state level, the federal level, and then just like, what are your own measures of success in doing things right? Like, I have to make sure that I can sleep well at night. So doing anything wrong and cutting corners, it doesn't work for me personally. Ensuring that I was managing up, managing across, and managing down. So communicating at all levels and not forgetting something. And so the same things, again, that was problems, they ended up being opportunities, because I am an open communicator. I was making sure that I'm taking notes and that I'm giving the right information to the right people at the right time. Yeah. I started to, once the HRIS system got up to date, we didn't try to do it all. So I'm famous for helping people to learn how to pump the brakes. I'm like, all right, we got to slow down here. But we put in place the systems that would help us most. So obviously payroll. But then the next thing was like the employee self-service. So we got some of the things automated that would give employees the answers. And so they weren't coming to me directly to change their taxes, to update their 401k contributions. And then I created kind of a long-term plan. And then I communicated that to not just my manager, but to the CEO, the COO, to the stakeholders, right? And what that did was, and which this is the scary part. This can be scary for a lot of people. You know that your leader or the leaders want to see this thing and they want to see it tomorrow, if not today at 6 p.m. And then telling them that we gotta hold, that we gotta rearrange the way that we're thinking about this when they're gung-ho. But the thing is not just saying, I can't do this because it's too much. Why is this? Let's make it tangible for them. If we try to do all of these things, what do we lose in the process? Then what else is not happening as a result of doing this? And then what does that do to the employees? What does that do to the candidates? How could that negatively impact payroll, right? So it's having those conversations with the right people, no matter how hard they are, at the right time.
Yep. And it sounds like you were doing a good job with communication, but also you mentioned an SLA. So you were managing expectations, whether or not people still adhered to those expectations is a whole different thing. But I think it's important to do that, right? It's to set up these processes and these commitments to different team members, knowing what time you have available and knowing what you'll be able to give to everybody. And that creates accountability on your side to make sure you can stay within those timelines. But then for others, it, lets them know what they can expect, which is really what people want. They want clarity. And like you just mentioned with explaining, if we do this, then this will happen. Or if we do that, then that will happen. It's all about managing expectations, explaining the why, providing clarity. That goes a long way in building trust throughout the organization. And I think this is one of the things that, maybe a lot of people outside of HR talent acquisition don't necessarily see, is that when you're a lean HR or talent acquisition team, you've got all these processes, you've got open roles, you've got different hiring managers for those open roles. You've got different hiring processes for all of these roles. And not only do you have all these things going on, but they're all happening at different points and different timelines. You're here in this hiring process for that role. You're here in this hiring process for this other role. Oh, by the way, you're also in the middle of open enrollment, and next month you're starting the onboarding for the new HRIS. So it's like you've got all these things and these competing priorities. And so A, that's why process is so important. B, that's why managing expectations and communication is so important. But C, and this is what I'm curious about with your approach, is it's so important to actively engage those around you that are outside of HR and talent acquisition. So let's say it's related to hiring. Actively engage the hiring managers to play an active role in the hiring process. Not that they have to own the process. You can still be the steward of the process, but their involvement is key for the success of the process, because as a lean team, you need to be working together, right? And that's the only way you're going to A, deliver the best candidate experience, and then B, get to the best result at the end of the hiring process, is you need their involvement. So with that, I'd be curious on what your approach is in building trust with those managers and thinking about how do you get them bought into the process? How do you get them working with you so they can become an extension of you throughout the hiring process?
My approach has always been, first of all, not to be the scary HR person, right? Sometimes people say, I feel like I'm coming to the principal's office. It's like, no. You're not coming to the principal's office. But again, it's all about, and I cannot say this enough, it's all about conversation. It's all about helping them, not assuming that they know because they've been a manager for X, Y, Z amount of years, right? It's helping them to understand what recruitment is going to look like here in this organization, what success will look like in this organization, and how this is the process. Again, this is the overarching process, and here's your role, clearly defining that role for them, clearly giving them your expectations. So one of my biggest expectations for hiring managers was I need you to respect the process, one. But two, I need you to make this a priority. This is your hire. I can't send you resumes on Monday and then you don't get back to me until 2 weeks later on a Friday and then expect me to turn back around the following Monday. Like, you have to make this a priority. And so what does that mean, Lakia? Right? So like reviewing the resumes, communicating back to me if what you're getting is not matching, the expectations, right? Like, you have to be an active participant in this, not just sitting back waiting for things to just be handed to you. But again, before we can do that, we have to have the process documented. We have to ensure we can get all of the managers in the room at the same time, really, and say, so that the beauty about that, right? See, I get so excited about this. The beauty about getting everybody in the room at the same time and putting it on a PowerPoint and saying, here's our new process. Here's what the manager's role is. Here's what HR's role is, right? You know that everybody got the same message at the same time. You can even record it. So then if somebody, I didn't hear that. Well, let me show you the Zoom. Here it is again. But documenting that and just ensuring that everyone is following this process and that you're giving frequent reminders, right? So communicating it. And then when we run into bumps on the road, as we're tweaking the process, then we're sending out updates. But we're getting everyone on the same page, or gets on the starting line at the same time, communicating that information, and then we are reassuring them, or getting it back out. Like, nope, this is it. We're right sizing them when they start to veer right, like nope, come back over here in the middle. That is extremely helpful. Again, you cannot communicate enough. There's no such thing as too many processes, because when you're that one person department, having a process for everything is what keeps you together, is what keeps you organized. Because I can't tell you how many times I've had too many balls in the air. And I go to my process document. It doesn't make me look weak. It doesn't make me look like I don't know. What it does is it shows you that I am committed to this. I'm committed to you getting out of this what you need to get out of it, if you're as the end user, whatever it is, right? And so I think that would be I think those are my biggest points.
Yeah, and to your point, I think the process is what grounds you, right? So when things get chaotic, it's just like, trust the process, right? Get back to the process. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the process you have in place today is going to be the best process for tomorrow, but that's the whole point of having the process in the first place, is you can measure, you can adapt, and you can work with hiring managers on saying, hey, this is the process that, we've built together. This is how we're going to run this hiring process. Here are the expectations. But that doesn't mean this is a closed dialogue, because if you have feedback, or if there are things that are not working, we want to be able to update our process, and then update our process documentation, then update our training, then release that update to all of the hiring managers so we're doing things consistently across the board. If we find something that works better, why would we not do it if it works better? But it becomes a lot easier to integrate that into your process and to get buy-in when you have a process in the first place. So, yeah, it's awesome. This was just really, really good stuff. It's been great learning about the work that you're doing with your clients, great learning and digging into the past a little bit from your previous experience, being on a lean HR team. And this has just been really insightful for me, and I know our audience is going to love it. So thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. This has been such a great conversation. Such a great conversation. It's funny you said analogy. So I speak in analogy. So I keep my stuff. I want everybody to understand at all points, right? Like, so we keep, when people come, the way I talk to you today is the way I talk to my people. And it's really it's really, you're talking about foundational level. It's me at a foundational level, personally and professionally, right?
Yep.
And so I hope your audience enjoy it. I hope it's not too many analogies. I hope I just gave it on a way that's real, in a way that's real, that's actionable, right? That it's like, we don't have to be so at 10 at all times.
Yep.
Right? Let's bring it down a little bit, because if we're up here, sometimes we're, the way that I say it with some of my professional colleagues, if you're always on, you're always thinking about, am I saying the right thing? Did I say a double negative? No. How about we just take 10 steps back and talk to me like I'm your friend.
Yep.
Not your full friend, but, a friend that you keep it halfway together with, right?
Yep.
But it helps us. It helps.
Totally. And that's how we operate as the best versions of ourselves as well. And that's how we help others do the same. Is if we're relatable, it helps build trust. If we're vulnerable, it helps build trust. And if we're just, at the end of the day, that's one of our core values here at SparkHire is you be you. If we're just our authentic selves, and everybody on the team are also acting as their authentic selves, it allows us to just work a lot better, because we can cut through all of this stuff about, like you said, trying to say things perfect, or being worried about this, or what did this person think about that. It's like, at the end of the day, I just want you to be you, and I want you to bring your best ideas to the table, and we're going to work together to make it happen. And so, I appreciate the analogies, and I appreciate the relatable communication style. I think it makes making progress a lot easier, because you don't have to worry about, to use your phrase from earlier, you don't have to worry about all that other waste in communication or in thought, right? You can just focus on the task at hand. So this has been great.